More than a decade after Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 vanished from radar shortly after taking off from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia's Transport Ministry has now announced that a private marine...
More than a decade after the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, the world still seeks answers. How did a plane carrying 239 people vanish, leaving only fragments behind? New deep-sea footage from the Indian Ocean reveals haunting images of wreckage once hidden in darkness. Despite advanced technology and global search...
Distributed across the cabin interior, rearranged by ocean currents over the years, but still present in quantities that investigators found significant. The overhead storage bins in several sections had burst open, their contents long since dispersed, but the structural integrity of much of the cabin was startling given the circumstances. Aviation engineers who reviewed the footage noted that the condition of the fuselage was more consistent with a controlled water landing or a very low-speed impact than with the high-energy ocean strike that most accident models had predicted. The cockpit area presented the most disturbing and significant findings. The flight deck door appeared to be in a closed position. Inside the cockpit, the captain's seat was occupied by skeletal human remains, still positioned at the controls. The first officer's seat was empty. These details, captured on video and confirmed by multiple forensic specialists who reviewed the footage, immediately intensified scrutiny of the final moments of the flight and the question of who, if anyone, was in control of the aircraft when it ended. Forensic details and what they suggest. Aviation forensic specialists and accident investigators who have reviewed the available evidence from the 2025 discovery have been careful to emphasize that detailed forensic analysis of a wreck site at 4,000-meter depth is extraordinarily difficult, and that definitive conclusions require extensive further work. What can be said with confidence is that the physical state of the aircraft raises questions that simpler accident theories struggle to fully answer. Evidence shows. Advocacy groups representing MH370 families have consistently called for an independent international investigation with full access to all collected data, satellite imagery, and forensic findings. They have also called for governments and private organizations involved in the search to release all information that may have been withheld, regardless of the sensitivity of its origins. What comes next? The 2025 discovery of MH370's wreck represents a turning point in one of aviation history's longest and most painful mysteries. But it is emphatically not the end of the investigation. The next phase, physical recovery of the recorders, forensic examination of the wreck, identification of human remains, and full reconstruction of the flight's final hours, will take years and demand a level of international cooperation and financial commitment that governments and agencies involved will need to openly commit to. The aviation safety implications of finally understanding what happened to MH370 extend far beyond the tragedy itself. The lessons drawn from this event have the potential to reshape how commercial aircraft are tracked, how black box data is transmitted in real time rather than stored on devices that can be lost, and how international protocols for aviation emergencies are structured. Several of these reforms have already been partially implemented in the years since 2014, but a complete understanding of MH370's final flight could accelerate and deepen those changes in ways that protect future passengers worldwide. The footage from the ocean floor is haunting in ways that transcend technical analysis. It is a record of human lives interrupted, of a journey that ended in one of the most isolated places on Earth, of a mystery that consumed a decade of grief, effort, and unanswered longing. Whatever the investigation ultimately concludes about the cause of MH370's disappearance, the discovery of the wreck returns something essential to the families who were told for 11 years that there was simply nothing to find. There is something to find. And the world owes it to those 239 people to find every last piece of the truth. And oceanographers have been examining carefully. The seafloor topography in the southern Indian Ocean is among the least mapped in the world. Vast sections of the region had not been charted to the resolution required for confident wreck detection before the MH370 searches began. Even sophisticated sonar systems can miss objects buried under sediment, oriented in certain ways relative to the sonar beam, or located in acoustic shadow zones created by the surrounding terrain. Additionally, the specific location identified in 2025 falls outside the primary search areas defined by the 2014 through 2018 searches. This suggests that either the Inmarsat satellite signal analysis used to define those areas contained errors or assumptions that need revision, or that ocean drift modeling of the recovered debris was more imprecise than the researchers who used it believed. Both possibilities are being examined. The discovery does not imply negligence or incompetence on the part of previous search teams. It reflects the genuine difficulty of locating a single aircraft in one of the most remote and hostile environments on Earth. The families and the meaning of discovery. For the families of the 239 people aboard MH370, the discovery of the wreck is not a simple conclusion. Many have waited 11 years for confirmation that their loved ones' remains could be located and, where possible, identified and returned. The discovery creates a foundation for that process, but it is a slow, technically demanding, and emotionally devastating one. Deep-sea recovery operations at 4,000-meter depth are at the absolute edge of current technology, and the retrieval of remains and wreckage components from such a site will require enormous resources, careful international coordination, and extended timelines. Several families have spoken publicly about their complicated feelings upon learning of the discovery. Relief that the plane has been found exists alongside renewed grief, anger about the years of uncertainty, and an urgent demand for full transparency about what the condition of the fuselage, largely intact with minimal breakup, is inconsistent with an uncontrolled, high-speed ocean impact. The ATSB's 2017 safety investigation report into MH370 concluded, based on simulator studies and the condition of recovered debris, that the aircraft was most likely in a steep, high-speed descent when it hit the ocean. The relatively intact state of the fuselage found in 2025 challenges that specific conclusion, though investigators are cautious about drawing firm inferences from video footage alone without direct physical examination of the wreck. The positioning of the remains in the captain's seat has renewed discussion about who was flying the aircraft and why. It does not, by itself, establish the cause of the accident. Remains can shift and settle over 11 years on the ocean floor, and the configuration observed does not necessarily reflect the exact positioning of individuals at the moment of impact. What it does confirm is that human remains are present at the site, which is significant for the ongoing identification effort and for the families of those aboard. The condition of the black box recorders, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder, is of paramount concern to investigators. Both devices are built to withstand enormous forces and are designed to be recoverable even from great depths. Their status, as determined from the 2025 footage and any subsequent physical examination, will be the single most important factor in determining whether the final minutes of MH370 can ever be fully reconstructed. Without the data stored in those devices, the definitive cause of the accident may remain unknown regardless of how clearly the wreck site is documented. Why this location was missed. One of the most pressing questions raised by the 2025 discovery is why, after two major professional search campaigns covering hundreds of thousands of square kilometers, the wreck was not found earlier. The answer lies in a combination of factors that investigators. The 2025 mission and what changed. Ocean Infinity returned to the southern Indian Ocean in early 2025 with a fundamentally different approach. The company had spent years refining its search methodology, incorporating improved satellite data analysis, updated ocean current modeling, and newer generations of autonomous underwater vehicles capable of operating at extreme depths with greater precision and endurance than any equipment used in previous searches. Crucially, the search zone was shifted based on reanalyzed drift data from the recovered debris, new interpretations of the Inmarsat satellite signals, and previously unconsidered meteorological anomalies that may have affected earlier drift calculations. The autonomous vehicles descended into depths exceeding 4,000 meters. Pressures so extreme that no human diver could survive, scanning the seafloor in systematic grids across a region that had not been covered in prior efforts. For weeks, the vehicles transmitted sonar data back to the surface vessel in a process that was as psychologically grinding as it was technically demanding. Operators reviewed thousands of sonar returns, each one requiring careful analysis to distinguish geological formations from man-made objects. Ridges, sediment plains, ancient volcanic formations. The ocean floor in this region is a landscape of extraordinary complexity, shaped over millions of years by tectonic activity. Then, during one of those routine scanning passes, a sonar return appeared that did not match any natural feature in the area. The shape was too symmetrical, too regular, and its acoustic signature was consistent with aluminum alloy and composite materials rather than rock or sediment. The autonomous vehicle was redirected for a closer pass. The data confirmed what analysts had barely allowed themselves to hope for. A large metallic object resting on the seafloor, its outline consistent with the fuselage of a wide-body commercial aircraft. What the cameras showed. When remotely operated submersibles descended to the site and began transmitting live video, the images that came back were unlike anything the investigation had produced in 11 years. The aircraft was remarkably intact. The fuselage was not scattered across kilometers of seafloor, as many experts had predicted given the assumed high speed. By First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, the aircraft, a Boeing 777-200ER registered as 9M MRO, was one of the most reliable wide-body jets in commercial aviation history. There was nothing in the pre-departure checks, whether briefings or maintenance logs, that suggested anything unusual was about to unfold. At 1:19 a.m., the crew made their final radio contact with Malaysian air traffic control, signing off with the words "Good night, Malaysia 370, as they crossed into Vietnamese airspace. 1 minute and 22 seconds later, at 1:21 a.m., the aircraft's transponder, the device that broadcasts a plane's identity, altitude, and position to civilian radar, went completely silent. No distress call was made. No emergency squawk code was transmitted. The plane simply ceased to exist on civilian radar without a single indication of trouble. Malaysian military radar continued to track a primary radar return, which showed the aircraft making a sharp left turn, reversing course across the Malay Peninsula, flying northwest up the Strait of Malacca, and then banking south toward the vast, empty expanse of the southern Indian Ocean. This deliberate and dramatic course change, executed in the dead of night over one of the world's most isolated ocean regions, has remained at the center of every theory and investigation ever since. The aircraft's last confirmed position was calculated through a series of automated satellite handshake signals, known as Inmarsat pings, which indicated the plane continued flying for approximately 7 more hours after losing radar contact, ultimately running out of fuel somewhere along a broad southern arc in the Indian Ocean. 11 years of searching. The search that followed MH370's disappearance was unlike anything the aviation world had ever attempted. More than 24 nations contributed ships, aircraft, satellites, and personnel to an effort that ultimately scanned over 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor and cost upward of $160 million. The initial focus was the South China Sea, where the flight was expected to have been, but satellite analysis quickly redirected attention to the southern Indian Ocean, a region characterized by violent weather, extreme depths, and some of the most treacherous seas on the planet. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau led the primary underwater search between 2014 and 2017, deploying towed sonar systems and autonomous underwater vehicles across a designated search area west of Australia. Despite meticulous coverage of over 120,000 square kilometers, the aircraft was not found. Ocean Infinity conducted its own search in 2018, covering an additional 112,000 square kilometers in just 90 days using a fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles, yet still returned without locating the wreckage. Each failed search added another layer of bewilderment to a mystery that seemed to deepen with every passing year. The only physical evidence recovered during this period came from debris washing ashore on coastlines across the western Indian Ocean. In July 2015, a flaperon, a movable section of the aircraft's right wing, was discovered on the beach of Réunion Island. French and Malaysian authorities confirmed through serial numbers and maintenance records that it belonged to 9M MRO, the missing Boeing 777. Over the following years, more than 24 additional pieces of aircraft debris were recovered from beaches along Madagascar, Mozambique, Tanzania, and South Africa. Marine biologists and oceanographers used the barnacle growth on these pieces, along with sophisticated ocean drift modeling, to narrow the estimated crash zone. But the ocean itself, cold, crushing, and vast, refused to give up the fuselage. More than a decade has passed since the world watched in disbelief as Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 slipped off radar screens and vanished into one of the most remote stretches of ocean on Earth. 239 people boarded that Boeing 777 in Kuala Lumpur on the night of March 8, 2014, expecting to land in Beijing before sunrise. They never arrived. What followed became the most expensive, most exhaustive, and most emotionally devastating aviation search in recorded history. Years turned into a decade, and the southern Indian Ocean kept its silence. Then, in early 2025, a marine exploration company named Ocean Infinity launched a new deep-sea mission armed with next-generation autonomous underwater vehicles, refined drift modeling, and artificial intelligence-assisted sonar mapping. What their cameras captured from the ocean floor sent shockwaves through the aviation world, through grieving families, and through every corner of the internet that had spent 11 years speculating about what really happened to MH370. The footage did not simply provide closure. It opened an entirely new chapter of questions, and those questions are darker, more complex, and more haunting than almost anyone had anticipated. The night the plane disappeared. To understand why this new footage carries such enormous weight, it is important to revisit exactly what happened on the night of March 8, 2014. Flight MH370 departed Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 12:41 a.m. local time, climbing smoothly to its cruising altitude of approximately 35,000 feet. The flight was commanded by Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a highly experienced pilot with over 18,000 hours